Why, getting dumped was the best thing that ever happened to me. Oh, Tristan, you innovative ghoster. If you could see me now, but we'll get to that later. Before we continue, please like and subscribe. Let's rewind to the glorious day I got dumped. It wasn't raining, there was no thunder to emphasize the crushing blow, and the sky didn't weep for my heartbreak. Not that Tristan deserved such drama. No, it was a perfectly clear Tuesday. I had just walked into our cozy little apartment, full of plans for a Pinterest-worthy wedding and a future where he'd maybe, just maybe, learn how to separate his laundry. Instead, I found him at the kitchen table, looking at me with the expression of someone about to explain that he'd eaten the last slice of cake. Except this wasn't about cake. It was about how I was too much, too needy, too demeaning to his fragile ego. He actually used that word, demeaning. I stood there clutching a bouquet of peonies, a symbol of happy marriage. How ironic, and listened as he described my love as suffocating, my excitement as overbearing, and my loyalty as something akin to a golden retriever. Whoa, Tristan, the literary genius. You're just too clingy, he said, as if he'd invented the word. And so, the engagement ended with a whimper. No slamming doors, no tear-streaked dramatic exits. Just a numb walk out of the apartment and a new understanding of how disappointing a human being could be. A one-way ticket to Blue Haven. It was after 2 weeks of crying into ice cream and watching reruns of a show where every main character seemed to have a perfect love story that I finally snapped. Enough was enough. I bought a one-way ticket to Blue Haven, a picturesque seaside town, because if I was going to wallow, I might as well do it somewhere with fresh sea air and scenic cliffs perfect for yelling into the void. But Blue Haven had other plans for me. On my first day, I met Adrian, and if Tristan had been a rainy Tuesday, Adrian was a thunderstorm at midnight, dark, intense, and impossible to ignore. He had eyes like a stormy ocean and a demeanor that said, I could ruin your life and make you thank me for it. When he introduced himself as Tristan's friend, I nearly spit out my coffee. Friend? Really? Really, he said, with a smirk that promised trouble. But don't worry, we don't share opinions. I should have run right then and there. Instead, I let him guide me to his car, a sleek black machine that purred like a contented panther, and take me to a private estate. For your safety, he said. Apparently, Blue Haven had more secrets than I'd anticipated. Lessons in self-defense and couture? Living with Adrian was like stepping into an alternate universe. Within days, I was learning how to box, shoot, and perform evasive maneuvers in designer heels. Self-defense is important, he insisted, as he handed me a pair of custom Louboutin stilettos. Luxury is a weapon. A weapon for what? I asked, skeptical. He smiled. For being unforgettable. He was infuriating. The kind of man who could compliment my wit while simultaneously maneuvering me into a chess game I didn't even realize we were playing. And yet, every conversation left me breathless, as though I'd been sparring with a poet instead of a man who owned half of Blue Haven. Adrian believed in preparation, not just physically but mentally. He taught me how to anticipate moves, read expressions, and respond with poise. There were late nights of strategy games, each match filled with subtle lessons. People reveal everything if you know how to watch, he said one evening, his eyes glinting with amusement as I lost another game of chess. Like you, I teased. What do you reveal? Only what I want you to see, he murmured. There was more to him than charm and lessons, though. Adrian was a paradox, a man who could quote philosophy one moment and demonstrate knife-throwing skills the next. He surrounded himself with books that lined walls like ancient guardians of knowledge, and every title seemed tailored to a man who lived between shadows and light, dinner parties and power games. Of course, life with Adrian meant stepping into a world of dinner parties where conversation was a dance of veiled threats and poetic jabs. He would take my arm, lead me into a room full of Blue Haven's elite, and smile like he owned every secret there. One night, a particularly sharp-tongued guest leaned in too close and remarked, Adrian's taste in companions has evolved. I met his gaze without flinching, and my taste in men has drastically improved. Adrian's lips twitched with amusement, but his eyes burned with pride. The return of Tristan naturally, just as my life was teetering between thrilling and downright absurd, Tristan reappeared. He looked worse for wear, like a man who'd aged a decade in the span of a month. His hair was disheveled, his eyes sunken, and he smelled faintly of regret. You're making a mistake, he blurted, cornering me outside a cafe. Adrian, he's not who you think he is. I raised an eyebrow. Whoa, and you are? The man who ghosted me with a live breakup. He flinched. He's controlling. Yeah, I said, folding my arms, and I love it. That shut him up. But Tristan wasn't one to give up easily. He started showing up more at the market, near my favorite coffee shop, with pathetic attempts to save me from the so-called darkness he was convinced Adrian embodied. He manipulates people, he hissed one day, grabbing my arm. He's dangerous. I yanked my arm free. No, Tristan. You manipulate people with your half-baked sincerity. Adrian? He just wins. The truth was, Adrian's darkness wasn't something I feared, it was something I understood. It was the same shadowy place where all of us hide our vulnerabilities, but instead of letting it consume him, he wielded it like a weapon. With him, I was never afraid to be exactly who I was. Grand gestures and gardens. Adrian didn't just sweep me off my feet. He orchestrated an entire opera of romance. One evening, he led me to a garden drenched in wisteria, where lanterns flickered like fireflies. The air smelled of jasmine and something sweet I couldn't place. What if I ran off with everything you've given me? I teased. He shrugged. I'd chase you and find me sipping lattes. Obviously, we strolled deeper into the garden. Flowers I couldn't name stretched in colorful arcs above us, as if the entire scene had been plucked from a painting. A small fountain bubbled nearby, and the flicker of fireflies turned the night into a living constellation. Adrian turned to me, his expression softening in a way that made my breath hitch. You know, he said, brushing a stray curl from my cheek, you were never too much, too loyal, too dramatic, too passionate. Those are the very things that make you extraordinary. Tears pricked the corners of my eyes. Are you always this smooth? Only when it matters. When he kissed me, it wasn't just a kiss. It was a declaration of devotion, of ownership, of a future where I was no longer a clingy fiancé begging for scraps of affection, but a woman standing tall in a world that finally made room for all my drama and flair. He gave me more than flowers and whispered promises. Adrian taught me to love the power I carried within me. We sparred in more ways than one, and he always looked at me like I was his greatest challenge and most cherished prize. I took up sketching again in that garden. Adrian called it my sanctuary. Sometimes he would join me, reading quietly, or throwing in the occasional comment that made me laugh. He commissioned a custom-built studio on the estate. So you can paint without worrying about the rain, he'd said. And Tristan, well, last I heard, he was mumbling into a whiskey glass, lamenting the woman who got away. Rumor had it he tried dating a girl who didn't cling, but she didn't stick around long enough to hear about his laundry philosophy. But me, I was dancing in the moonlight, blooming with every ounce of my unapologetic, beautiful chaos. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine, full of adventure, laughter, and an understanding that I didn't need to be less. I only needed to be me, dramatic, loyal, and entirely unforgettable. And when I look back at that numb walk from Tristan's apartment, I laugh. Because getting dumped was the best thing that ever happened to me.